Welcome everyone. My name's Tina from Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue Service. I am the prevention team leader for the home fire safety team. So that's the team that deals with all of our safeguarding, all of our home visits to people, to vulnerable people, and all of our referrals that come and go. So if you ever make a referral to the fire service, it will come via my team. And similarly, if we make referrals out to yourselves, then it's my team that are making those referrals. So we were asked to share some sort of case studies and learning. So we've picked a couple out that we think might be of interest. We were going to show a little tiny video, but we'll try and put that up in the chat at the end, the link, because the sound wasn't working properly when we tried it. So we'll leave that and we'll sort of go through the case studies. So I'll go through the background and the general sort of case study, and then we'll have a chat about what we think went well, what didn't go well, and what else we could have done. Because there's only a few partners involved in these two case studies, and what I'm really conscious of is there's this big wider partnership that all of you are from that potentially we haven't incorporated and we haven't used. So we're always trying to improve our learning, and we do all of this internally so that we can improve what we do. We can make sure we're getting the best outcome for the person. We always have a person-centred approach in the fire service, so we ensure the person is always at the centre of everything we do, and we can only really do that if we make sure that we're kind of involved with all the other people and all the other services out there. So we will happily come and deliver talks or deliver information about what we do and what we can offer to any partners, and you can always just kind of drop me a line in the chat and we'll be able to sort something out. So we'll go through the case studies and then we'll kind of do a little bit of a chat at the end of each one. So there's two of them. So I'm going to share my screen now. So hopefully everybody will be able to see this first case study. If you can just give a thumbs up, and Chloe will let me know if that's not come through to people. I'm unable to see the chat when I've now got my screen shared. So if you want to just take yourself off mute and shout out if you've got a question, or hopefully Chloe will be able to inform me if anybody's asking questions. So these are in the layout that we do our case studies in the fire service, but I'll try and make it a bit simpler when we go through it, just so it's easier to see. So basically, we are going to call them vulnerable person 1 and 2, just because we can't really kind of use their initials in case anybody knows who they are. So vulnerable person 1 is an adult who's 80 plus, living alone in sheltered housing. The risk factors when we picked up this person included memory concerns resulting in multiple cooking incidents and our crews attending. They had reminder sheets present in their kitchen for switching off their cooker and their electrical goods, and they had visits from EMAS and police on multiple occasions. So by the time we picked them up, they're already quite a vulnerable person. So I'm just going to go through a bit of a timeline really of what we kind of knew about them. So our interaction with them started in September, the 9th of the 5th, so 9th of May 2020. And this was when the crew attended a fire incident. This was cooking left unattended, and the vulnerable person had fallen asleep. Their flat was heavily smoke-logged, and they seemed very stressed and confused when we got there. And the crews did feel at the time that the gentleman was showing signs of dementia and memory problems. So we then contacted the fire crews to see if there was something called an FB174 submitted. Now, this is an internal form we use to increase our pump attendance. So we will always send 1 pump to start with to a fire. If we put in a special request on a 174, it means that we can have 2 or 3 pumps, whatever we request. So in this occasion, we felt that this potentially should have this form, and there should be an increase of it saying that person's reported as unable to get out of the building, because we felt they didn't have the capacity at the time to get out that building. So we didn't receive any response back from our crews or any further information at that time. So we contacted the vulnerable person ourselves and gained consent to visit and for any referrals we might need to make. We then contacted Adult Social Care. We found out there was no worker for this person, no recent concerns raised by them for anyone from any partners at all. So we contacted housing because they had a housing provider. They were on a training day, so we were unable to actually speak to them. So the next day we carried out our visit, our fire safety visit to the person in their home. And we basically decided we were going to send off a care needs assessment. So we submitted that because we thought they definitely needed some extra care. We then received the outcome of that referral quite quick after, on the same day, and that said that no further action would be being taken because they didn't meet the threshold to do that. So what we did then is we contacted their housing provider, and they informed us that there was lots of other risks they were concerned about, like cuckooing. So we then shared this information with social services, and they added that to their system. But we then thought if we'd have known about that, then actually our learning might have been that we wouldn't have put a care needs assessment in. We would have potentially put a safeguard in straight in. We then also sort of completed an assistive technology referral for housing, because we thought, you know, housing being the contact makes sense, and we could probably get some assistive technology there to help the gentleman. Social services then completed an assessment as well for the vulnerable person, and they deemed him to be managing his daily tasks and said there'd be no further action from that contact. So then on the 8th of August, which was obviously a few months later, we attended another fire incident, cooking left unattended, and the vulnerable person was absolutely adamant he turned his cooking off at 8 PM when he cooked his dinner. We actually received this call at 12:20 AM in the morning. So the cooking hadn't been turned off at 8 PM. He'd fallen asleep, and at 12:20 we were called out to deal with that. So in the meantime as well, we've received EMAS referrals sharing their concerns because they'd been called to the gentleman. And the vulnerable person, when we phoned up adult social care, was still not open to them. So we completed another safeguarding concern, summarising our previous incidents and referral. Then we liaised with housing to arrange a further visit because we thought we need to go and see him again. And social services shared that they'd got alerts from police and NHFT, EMAS and housing, all regarding that person. So social services then said the notification received, all the concerns have gone down as an alert, but they've got no concerns regarding the gentleman's capacity, so no further action will be taken. But they had logged the concerns from other agencies like cuckooing and the ability that we didn't feel he could care for himself. So we arranged a further visit, but then we had another further fire incident on the 13th of August, which was straight after the other incident. This time the vulnerable person was really confused, heavily smoke-logged flat, unaware his alarm was going off even though it was sounding, and had to be led outside by the crew. So we requested the info again from our crews and said, do we need to increase the attendance because we're getting really frequent attendance here. We submitted a safeguarding referral again to adult social care, including all the previous incidents, and we arranged a joint visit to carry out with housing to revisit the gentleman. We checked there was a lifeline in place, which there was, and he had assistive technology in place. He had a voice activated reminder to turn things off, and he had a vibrating pad to wake him up in the event of a fire. He mentioned to us he'd lost his hearing aids, therefore he was unable to communicate effectively with us. So housing chased his hearing aids for him, and he confirmed that he was struggling to get up after laying down. He was having some episodes when he tried to get up. So he was refusing to consider any other methods of cooking. The gentleman wanted to cook traditionally and cook traditional meals. So he decided it wasn't, you know, he couldn't use anything else. The microwave was being used instead of the cooker on occasions, but not in a safe manner either. But we felt during that visit he was presenting with capacity, and the only thing that we were really panicky about, we felt he was very vulnerable in that he could be exploited easily. So we shared all these reports with housing. We then submitted our own internal requests to increase the attendance from crews because we hadn't heard anything back. And we asked our control if we could know about any other incidents that took place at this address because they were coming in so frequently. We liaised with housing and gave a general overview. We discussed the revisit and we discussed further assistive technology. Then in October of the same year, we attended a further fire incident where he'd fallen asleep whilst cooking. It was felt by the crews his memory and hearing seemed to have got worse. The vibrating pad that could have alerted him to the fire was on the floor, not being used. And we had massive concerns that after everything we'd done to make sure there was 2 or 3 pumps attended, only 1 fire engine had attended again. So we had to look into what had gone wrong, and this was because the fire was reported at a different flat. So a neighbour had rang it in and given the wrong flat number. So there was no alerts for that flat, which is why we only got the single appliance attendance. So that was a different reason why that had gone wrong. So fire contacted social services again. We had no worker still allocated to the person, so we resubmitted safeguarding again. We then liaised with Be Persist to see if we could get some further technology. We hadn't heard back from housing, so we sort of emailed them, but they replied and said they didn't feel any further assistive technology would help because he's not responding to the voice recorder they've given him, not responding to a link smoke detector or the vibrating pad because it was found discarded on the floor. So housing then completed multiple safeguarding referrals and liaised with the memory clinic for some assessments on his memory. But the vulnerable person had started to become quite abusive to housing. He was getting really frustrated with the situation and what was happening to him. So multiple call attempts were then made to him to try and speak to him and try and gain another visit so we could go back, but we couldn't get hold of him for quite a number of weeks. So we decided we were just going to send one of our home safety advisors and just door knock. So that then happened on the 1st of December. We door knocked, and when we arrived, there was already a paramedic in attendance. He'd pressed his lifeline. He was feeling very frail and difficult to communicate with. He presented with very poor memory at the time and very distressed. It looks then like we had a conversation with him, which I find a little bit strange at this point because obviously he was very distressed when we got there. But we somehow managed to reiterate the importance of not leaving cooking unattended, and the escape plan shows that whenever we can, we'll get there. We'll try and get our information across. The vulnerable person's mobile apparently had been taken away by a friend, and he said that's why we hadn't been able to contact him because they'd pinched his mobile phone. And at the time, EMAS were looking into this with the police to find out if there had been anybody in the property and what had happened. Housing responded to us and said they were waiting to see if he was going to respite. So there was some news that the gentleman might be going into respite care because of his frailty at that point. We also contacted Adult Social Services and the Wellingborough Hub. We gave an overview of the whole situation again and our concerns and asked how we should progress. Should we submit another safeguarding, or are we just keep submitting safeguarding? Should we do it again? It's always difficult to know if you keep doing them or whether you stop. But we were told to wait and said that when the allocated social worker will screen it, then obviously they'll then contact us. So we then visited, shared the visit info with them. We shared all that with housing as well. We recommended things like a cooker shut-off device, and we recommended that we did a joint visit with the housing officer at the next visit. We then internally, myself, our complex case officer and the home safety supervisor, held a meeting regarding how we should move forward because we were struggling with what else we could do to support this gentleman. On the 14th of January, he did have another fire. Actually, I've missed, sorry, December. We actually had confirmation from housing that social care felt he would be better staying at home and actually having support at home, not moving to respite. So we then heard the social worker had gone off sick, and no further action had happened because they were sick. We'd also had a further 2 EMAS referrals. There was found to be no bills being paid, the bills had piled up, no food in the house. And the clutter rating was 4, and he had his reduced mobility and alcohol dependency at that time. He'd also called the ambulance 6 times in 1 week at that point, so they felt, the ambulance felt, and everybody felt he needed a bit more social care involvement. There was then a small fire in January, and that was the cooking on the hob. The whole property was smoke logged, no damage to the premise, but we had to wake up the person. We had to shake him to wake him up. He was completely unaware that we were in his house, that we'd broke in. He was completely unaware that the alarm was sounding, and he was completely unaware that his cooker was on fire at that point. Social care were also on the scene. They joined us there. The crew shared all their concerns with everything that we'd done so far to date. So we then completed another safeguarding referral, and we then started doing some background research into slow cookers and other safer methods of cooking. We then held the first 25th of January, the first MDT meeting. Housing confirmed that they could isolate the cooker due to the significant risk, but we'd have to put in some evidence to support this. And Housing also said they were happy to purchase a slow cooker if he would use it. So we sent in a supporting statement. We stated that there was a significant risk of fire if he continues to use the cooker without safety interventions. We made sure there was a working heat detector in the property, and we made sure that all the smoke alarms were working at that point. So police confirmed they'd had 8 PPNs put in, submitted in 1 month. They were concerned about exploitation. They were concerned because they'd been round to the property to visit. The cooking was on and unattended. The gas was left on even when there was no cooking on the cooker. And Housing and police confirmed that the gentleman had been talking to himself in the mirror, convinced he was talking to a third party in his house. There was then discussions with the police around installing CCTV in the flat and in the block. Social care was chasing hearing aids and further technology to assist with cooking timers and stove guards to get that protected. And we were looking at getting the START team involved as well with more suitable potential of housing options, like warden controlled. And the vulnerable person had indicated at that point he wanted that. We then received further EMAS referrals, same concerns again, so we didn't put any more safeguarding in. We had our second MDT meeting for him on the 9th of February 21. Confirmation was that the cooker had been disconnected, his slow cooker was being used. There's been 4 EMAS and 5 police call-outs, and 3 times he'd pulled his lifeline, so that was starting to reduce. He'd had visits from the START team who felt there was no support needed, and the vulnerable person was claiming he was feeling very isolated and lonely, so the social worker was working on getting some referrals for him for some help. His hearing aids were all working, they'd all been replaced, his memory tested had started. They were saying there was no sign of dementia, although he was still adamant there was someone else in the room that he was talking to in the mirror. Housing confirmed that he was very proud of using a slow cooker and it was going well. All the other cookers were disconnected and microwave had been taken away, so he was happily using that instead. He had a key safe, which we gave the code to our fire control so we could get in easily instead of breaking his door every time we went. We held another MDT meeting in February, 23rd February. Social worker did not attend this meeting, but fire, housing and police did. Professionals felt that everything was dramatically improved, but there were still those concerns around memory and the gentleman claiming people were entering his property all the time. So he had more hearing aids. They kept dropping on the floor and he kept standing on them, so they were constantly being replaced. It was found that he'd only pulled his cord twice in 1 week, and the police only had 1 incident due to cuckooing, so it was going down again. The focus was still on getting him moved to a suitable accommodation, but EMAS had also visited again and took down the mirror because he felt the mirror was booby-trapped, so he'd allowed them to take that down, which made him more happy and comfortable in the home. He'd claimed he slept with his keys in his pocket, but that someone had actually helped themselves and taken them out of his pocket while he was asleep. So again, this was looking to CCTV to be put up in the block so that we could see who was coming and going. So police, by the June of that year, last year, police had reported no further incidents since March, and they were both the reports of theft from his property. No further incidents at that point reported to us in fire, and no further EMAS referrals. So we decided that we would step back and wouldn't go as often, but we continued to liaise with housing because they were regularly visiting him, and keep our 174 in place, which would mean we'd have more than 1 pump if anything happened. He had ongoing support from social care, increasing his package. He had other agencies involved with meetings, the CCTV looking to be installed in the whole block, and police and housing working together to see what they could do legally wise, if was there some law they could use to keep the people out that they'd identified that were coming in and manipulating and taking advantage of him. So what did we use before we go through? I'll try and cover up what went well because we want to talk about that first. So what we used, we just try and put some kind of sum on our case studies, and it's really difficult to put a sum on it. So we kind of list who'd been involved from our point of view. We list the partners that are involved. and then we list any equipment we've given them, if we've given them fire retardant equipment or smoke alarms, heat alarms, CO alarms. So we came up with a rough estimate of the crews, how many times the crews had gone out, how much of our time we'd kind of invested, and came up with around £10,000. It's such a sort of pull from nowhere because it's so difficult to kind of put a price on what you've done. We then try and kind of look at any barriers or challenges that happened. And we said that it was a barrier internally because we could not get information from our own crews. And we struggle with that because crews go on for 2 days, on for 2 nights, and then off for 4 days. So we're constantly rotating our crews, which is difficult. Housing partnership, there was one time when they were on training for a day and we couldn't speak to anybody. Normally a day wouldn't matter, but that was the day we were going out on a visit, so it resulted in us not putting in the safeguarding referral. We don't think that would have made any difference because we subsequently put in a lot more safeguarding referrals. We found it really difficult in meeting the threshold for adult social care, despite lots of referrals from different partners. The only thing that was really needed paying for at that point was a slow cooker, which was £50, and that was paid for by housing. So we try and put those kind of prices in it, but it's really difficult. Then we try and go through what worked well, what didn't work well, and what could have worked better. So is there any other partners that could have been involved? What else could we have done? So at this point, I'm going to come back to everyone so I can see if there's anything being put in the chat. Sorry, I've just realised I was actually leaning down to read it, so all you've seen is kind of the top of my head and not my whole face, sorry. So looking kind of at the chat, or if anybody wants to kind of put their hands up and take their hands off, take themselves off mute. Is there anything that people think out of that case study went particularly well, or anything that didn't go particularly well that we can kind of discuss? Anything from our point of view you think fire didn't do particularly good? Or could we have done anything else? Yeah, Greg, you've got your hand up.
I wanted to commend you on the amount of work that the fire service did in putting forward safeguarding measures to try and protect this individual, because I know from experience as a housing support worker how difficult it can be working with the council and getting a positive outcome with their collaborative assistance or not in this case. So yeah, I can't see anything really different that you guys could have done for the individual personally.
Thanks, Greg, and thank you, because being a housing officer is a difficult task, and we're your number one fans because you help us unblock things. So thank you.
You're welcome. My colleague Muriel seconds that as well.
Thank you, Muriel.
Doesn't have much of a voice. I'm her voice for her today.
Thank you. We've got someone else's hand up. Let's have a look. Chloe, have we got 2 hands up? I think I can see one. Let's have a look. Jade, you've got your hand up, and then Richard.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I think your persistence really helped the case move forwards, and I feel like without that, the support wouldn't have been put in place, or would have been even further delayed more than I feel like it was. Yeah, from other parties involved. So yeah, I think your persistence was key.
Oh, thank you, Jade. That's really helpful to know. Thank you. Richard?
There were 2 things really. Is there kind of a liaison officer within the fire service, a local liaison officer that work with deaf people within the community? Do you have that, a liaison officer?
So we don't, but what we do have is we have a complex case officer that gets involved in these cases, and that's the lady called Sonia. And then we have a community safety team. So we do have community safety officers that can go out. So if it's a talk to a group, or there's a housing provider that's got...
Sorry, nobody specific for deaf people then?
No. We would link into different organisations that do that. We would like to have that, and in the past we have had somebody that has gone away and done. We had someone learn British Sign Language, Makaton. Unfortunately, they left, and it's the cost to then train someone up again. So we have got, as Sonia, our complex case officer, does do Makaton, but because she came from a safeguarding children background, but she doesn't do British Sign Language. So it's kind of really difficult because we don't have that. So we have to use kind of local other organisations that do that we link into. Do you have anybody that you kind of use, or anything that we could like use as cross kind of partners to do that?
I mean, that was the only thinking of our local one would have been Deaf Connect.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a local our local organisation for Northamptonshire. Social work in Northamptonshire, we work with deaf people. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we've used Deaf Connect generally. We do.
I mean, it might be worth referring to a safeguarding team within social services. Have you had links with them?
No, we haven't.
Yeah, so there's a specific safeguarding team that you could link in with within social services. So if you're going into social services as a general social services, there are, if you have major concerns about an individual, then you could link in with a safeguarding team specifically, and they deal with specific safeguarding issues. So you could, you know, if they are kind of crisis, then they are responsible for things like that.
Okay, so is that like a crisis team or something then that is immediate help?
Yeah, it's safeguarding.
Right. Brilliant, thank you. That's really helpful. I've made some notes of that. Thank you.
Oh, can I come in there? Do you mind, Tina?
No, not at all. I can't see a name there.
I'm Mercedes. I'm from the. I am from
yeah,
the
I was
adult.
coming to you next anyway, Mercedes. Yeah.
Oh no, I think someone put a hand up first, but I thought it might be better if I just
yeah, no problem.
responded
Thank you.
to what that lady was saying. Sorry, I didn't catch her name, but I'm actually in the adult safeguarding team at the North.
Right.
So I just wanted. I had my hand up because I was going to ask if you'd had considered a couple of things really, but just to clarify, the adult safeguarding team, we look at providers, but so that would be provider safeguarding. So for example, care homes, ambulance, hospital, you know, people that provide a service. But obviously one of those providers will be social care, you know, community teams. So we will also look at ourselves. So that lady was completely right that if you're struggling to get that support from those community teams, then certainly do come to us to raise those concerns that, you know, multiple safeguardings have been coming in and we're not getting the response that we need. But I was also going to ask if you'd considered an arm. So I know you'd said you'd had an MDT. Was that an arm?
It wasn't, and do you know what? I read back through the case study before when we were getting ready to present it, and I had to read through it a couple of times, and that was one of my biggest things. Was I read through it and went, why on earth didn't we start an arm? Because it doesn't make sense why we didn't start an arm through this. So I think about halfway through there,
sorry, can I just ask what NR? What was that? Sorry, an NR.
And it's an arm. So an arm is an adult risk management meeting. So the details of that are all on the NSAB, so Northamptonshire Safeguarding Adult Board website. And any service, anybody can raise an arm. If there is a person who is a risk to them, you know, is at risk of harm or death, serious harm or death through their actions. So it really frustrates me actually, Tina, in that that frustration that services have in meeting a threshold, because essentially that's where this arm comes in. You know, social services can't say you don't meet the threshold. If a person is at risk of serious harm to themselves or a death, then you know that threshold really is effectively met. So that's a bit of a, you know, it really bugs me, that kind of idea that the person themselves, because say they don't need care and support, they don't meet the threshold. But yeah, definitely one to look at, that the link on the NSAB website for that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely learning for us, that we should have started that, we should have done it, and we should have probably about halfway through, I think. Thank you. Sorry, I keep saying Richard because that's the name that's coming up, but you've got your hand up still. Is it a legacy hand or have you?
It is Richard. It's he's deaf, so I'm a sign language interpreter.
Perfect, thank you.
So I'm just going to try and take it down now. Just bear with me.
That's all right. I always leave them up and then
I've
by that
taken it
time
down. There
yeah,
we go.
it's all gone. Yeah, by that
There we
time I've normally thought of another question. Perfect, thank you. Okay, so I don't think there's any more hands up. Okay, so we'll go back to the actual document and we'll just have a little look about what we identified. So again, we identified that what worked well was persistence from professionals, which brilliant is what you've sort of said, that we did keep putting in the referrals and keep on. I put MDT meetings that professionals were able to, I should say hold, but it says hold, each other to account. But obviously, I think it should have been an arm a lot sooner than just an MDT. An MDT meeting is kind of not as high as an arm, but I think having what we've sort of discussed there, that it would have met an arm straight away to do. We said that the immediate risks were reduced. The memory concerns like forgetting cooking and talking to yourself in the mirror, losing things, they were all being addressed of those real imminent sort of harm things. And it was evident that we pushed back that immediate serious risk of harm was evident. So we did push that back, that it was. The vulnerable person was really pleased with the slow cooker. So it was we didn't push that on him to start with. It was a very slow kind of change over to that, so that he would have something that would, one, keep him safe, but he could still feel like he was cooking for himself, and he loved it because he could just keep reheating stuff up in it as well. So it worked even better for him in the end. He also agreed to alternative housing, and he's now currently was awaiting a space to become available. So that was really positive. It worked, that he kind of came to his own conclusions, that he didn't feel he was in the right location of the safe place. We looked at, he was staying in respite care, and they decided he wouldn't be returning home, and he's since been moved to suitable sheltered housing accommodation. So that was all really positive. So we looked at what could have been done differently. We should have internally definitely have sorted out got our act together in terms of the process of what are we doing when we put together the 174 to ask for a more increased crew attendance. So that's a given. We can put that in place even if we've not visited somebody, even from a call from the partner. So if one of yourselves phone up and say, really worried about someone, this is why, we haven't got to visit yet, we can still increase that turnout from the crews. So that should have been done. We said the MDT meeting should have been called sooner, and sometimes it's difficult, like I said, to contact social care and get hold of the right people. We should have initiated that ourselves. We shouldn't be waiting for that. And those tips that people have given on where you can go to different departments is really, really useful. We've said that if housing weren't on the training day, but we then said, well, actually, that was only one day. Yes, we would have put something in differently straight away, but it ended up, it wouldn't have changed the outcome because we continued to put in safeguarding referrals. We said, could we have explored the alternative cooking method sooner? But he was very passionate about his cooking, and he really wanted to cook himself on the cooker. So it was very difficult. We needed to take him along with us. We didn't want to force him to do something he didn't want to do. And then we said there was another incident that was reported, and the system stated he was in a confused state and believed his fridge was on fire, but that wasn't logged on our system. So we weren't sure where that had come from, and that we didn't do a safeguarding referral after that. What we didn't know was, had that been completed to adult social care by our crews separately, because it was a weekend or somewhere where they couldn't get hold of one of us. But that was really strange. So we didn't have any record of that. So that's kind of our own internal systems of storing stuff as well that we need to get better at. So what changed in the fire service as a result of this case study? We got a new process for our 174s. So we are now able, it was only our control that could see them. We are now able in our department to see all of the domestic premises that are on there, which has been really handy because we lock orders and people that are at a much higher risk. So it's meant that we know that that person is at a higher risk, and we know that we can obviously potentially talk to partners about that person if they ring up just to have a chat about somebody. We appointed a full-time complex case officer to support with long-term support with these cases. Fortunately for the complex case officer, she's about to go on maternity. Unfortunately for us, we're losing her for a little while, but she's been replaced by a gentleman called Chris. So if you kind of ring up for Sonia, you'll get Chris at the moment for the next kind of 6 to 8 months. We also put into place a full-time coordinator to give us more support with admin. We now have the ability to discuss cases as a team, so we do regular team meetings, which we didn't do before, to step cases up and down. We did loads of training to our crews on safeguarding processes and procedures. We put them on something called the MDT, which is on their actual pumps. They've got a screen on their fire engine. They are now able to see this stuff when they go, so they will get the information that this person is at higher risk. They'll get any information that we've had safeguarding concerns, and they'll know this by the time they turn up at the door. So if the person is vulnerable and is likely to be fast asleep or unconscious through alcohol, we will know that. We have designed safeguarding posters which tell people where to go, to what member of staff. We have a daily summary come from control now to tell us in the last 24 hours everything that happened, so we can easily identify repeat callers. So we will know straight away if that address is coming up again and if we're having issues at the same address or same person. And we've made mandatory safeguarding training packages for all personnel now. With other departments, we shared evaluation forms. We didn't even do these case studies or write them up before this time, so we've started doing that. And again, we pass on concerns in a much better way. We said learning-wise, we probably do need to progress quicker, and I know that Chloe and the team have done in the business office so much work in terms of promoting ARM meetings and who can start an ARM. So we basically need to just get better as a fire service and braver and just a little bit more confidence in starting those ARMs ourselves and knowing that what we're doing is the right thing, which would really help. So that would have helped from that point of view as well. So conscious of time, let's up the other one and we'll just quickly talk through this one. So this is vulnerable person number 2. So this is a lady, 70-plus-year-old female. She lived alone in a 2-bedroomed end terraced home. She had poor mobility, was at risk of lots of falls, had a history of strokes, had no care and support in place when we first met her, and all of her siblings lived quite far away, so she felt quite isolated. She came to our attention by the housing provider because she was identified as a hoarder. So we got this in on the 2nd of February this year, and concerns were shared from housing saying that one of their tenants, they've discovered the property to be heavily hoarded and in very poor repair. She was reluctantly engaged with housing, and initially she did not say yes to a home fire safety visit. She didn't want one, but she had poor mobility, concerns around risk of fall and becoming trapped in a hoard if there was to be a fire. She wouldn't escape in an emergency. She had working smoke alarms because she had a housing provider that was checking those, and CO alarms, and she was a non-smoker, which reduced her risk a little bit. And housing shared that they'd already given a referral into adult social care about this lady. So we had our complex case officer by then, because this is a case for this year, from this year. So we checked our systems. We didn't know the property or the occupier. They were not previously known to us at all. And this is tending to happen more and more, that we're getting referrals in from partners that we have never known about before, that have kind of fallen under the radar. So we emailed housing to discuss gaining consent for a visit. We thought if we can't, we'll just go and do a door knock, but actually they came back on the same day and said the person had consented to a home safety visit. So we went and carried out the visit, and the following concerns were raised. The living room and dining room was waist height with possessions, so we're talking quite severe hoarding there. There was black bin liners blocking her exit from her kitchen. Small walkways in between the clutter, bedrooms head height in clutter, so that was severely worse upstairs. There were holes in the kitchen ceiling which would impact on fire separation, so the fire would spread very quickly around the property. Bathroom was full of clutter and black mould because they hadn't been able to get to it for quite a while. They were using matches to light their gas hob. Garden was overgrown, impacting on exit out of the back door. Due to the level of hoarding, the property was an end terrace, so there was concerns that if a fire was to occur, it could impact on fire spread to other properties along that row. Poor mobility, they're unable to clear and maintain their home. That it's unclear how they were managing their basic needs in that kind of property, because personal care would have been very difficult with the level of clutter. And there was a risk of falls and becoming trapped in the hoard. So advice was given to the person about reducing the clutter, trying to clear some kind of escape route, and safer cooking. Smoke alarms were tested and working, and we updated our mobilising system because we would have definitely needed more than one pump going out to that if there was a fire. So we looked at the risks highlighted, and we highlighted that all in a safeguarding referral. And they consented to that, the person consented to the safeguarding referral and any support we could offer them. So we created that on an official report of findings, so we can use that, send to housing, and partners can use our official report of findings to kind of help them if they need a little bit of leverage to try and work with the person or with other agencies. So invitation was received to an MDT meeting, so that went to a multidisciplinary team meeting straight away. The complex case officer attended along with housing and the allocated social worker, raised all our concerns, and concerns were also raised about self-neglect. This person was self-neglecting. We'd also received an email from housing saying they'd shared all of this with adult social care, and they were happy to assist with decluttering. The housing officer asked if we'd like to be kept updated. We said yes, because we change, obviously if it gets better we would change that. We would step down from having 3 pumps to only having 2, and then only having 1. We recommended lifelines and linked smoke alarms because that would support with the evacuation very quickly. Suggested we revisit to keep building that rapport with the lady, with the housing officer, because they already had a good rapport. We visited again on the 6th of April, and the next MDT took place on the 27th of April. We completed our joint visit, reiterated all our fire safety advice, tested the smoke alarms, advised on the escape routes and kitchen be prioritised in the clean-up, just to ensure that they could get out and we could get in to help the person out if there was any issues. And the notes were left with the care agency to reiterate this advice, so to keep helping the lady with this advice. The social worker picked up referrals for linked alarms and the key safe. Housing picked up looking into guidance clearance and speaking with benefits team to see if they qualified for any further support. We chased the GP as well to see if they were offering any support. Update from social care was received to say that they'd accepted and we now have a care agency to support them. So that was a massive plus with clearing and sorting. And the great thing was this will be in place Monday to Friday, 2 hours every day to help. So there was no way they were going to sort of decide they'll change their mind, because it was an ongoing everyday help with clearance. We had the MDT meeting. We attended again with housing and social work, social care. Environmental health weren't in attendance, but they fed in, and no response from the GP following an invite to attend. We had a confirmation from housing that the kitchen was now clear. The kitchen ceiling was now repaired and plastered, and the garden had been cleared. There was concerns raised for the person's memory and capacity from housing, and slow progress had been made with the carers to remove and sort items in the home. So although the repairs had been done and the garden had been cleared, they were showing quite a lot of reluctance with the help, accepting help from carers to clear the inside. Stair lift was in the property not working and causing quite restricted access with everything else that was on the stairs in the hallway. So another MDT meeting was arranged because we felt that was still quite high risk. Social worker looked into financial and capacity assessments, and also to if the stair lift can be removed, and liaised with environmental health to see if they could provide any support as well. They agreed to fund a skip, housing did, but due to the area unclear where it would be placed, it's often very difficult to find somewhere you can actually drop a skip off, even though we can then get one. We revisited the vulnerable person on the 16th of May. We progressed, looked at the progress made with clearance. Support was given with moving the bins to the end of the garden for waste collection. They had limited mobility, so they were struggling with moving bins. And also the garden still had a large amount of waste bags piled up, because obviously the bin people will only take what's in the bin. With all the clearance that was going on in the house, the pile was getting larger. So it was really difficult. And because they hadn't been able to put the bins out, they weren't even getting emptied. Tested the alarms, changed a faulty ECO alarm, and once the clutter had started being removed in the property, it became apparent that there was large gaps under the doors. Doors weren't fitting properly, so housing were looking into those, along with linked smoke alarms and a key safe. Social worker and housing then updated us that there was a request made for the key safe, and we put that on our system, and we gave that code to control, so we could get in, and not again, we would be damaging the property and breaking doors down. And housing said they'd look at the gaps under the doors and obviously looking into repairing the bits that were now being uncovered with hoard going. So in June, another MDT meeting was held, and it was basically from there concerns raised about the garden, how overgrown it had already become again since the last clearance. It was full of brambles, and again there was limited access again now for that person to get out and escape. Housing were unable to provide any further free clearances because nobody's got endless money to keep doing that. CO alarm was now in place, but again wasn't working properly, so we had to that was sorted out. And again, clearance was very slow indoors to actually get the horn out of the way of doorways to give a clear escape route. Obviously, the stairs were still hoarded, and again, that's with limited access to the stairs. This is going to be their next area of focus. And again, we agreed to revisit in the July. Social worker unable to attend the MDT meeting, but she had a chance to speak to the GP, and she's made significant progress with the GP, and significant progress with building rapport with a carer that she was particularly happy with and was really working well with them. Environmental health were chasing extra bins so that they could have an extra bin, and also something called a collection service. So the bin people can do that assisted collection service where they actually come and remove, take the bin to the curb themselves. So whereas they won't touch your bin if it's not out on the curbside, in this case, if you're registered on this system, they will come and get your bin for you. Care agency said social care had consented to the help with the vulnerable person with shopping and bills and day-to-day support. So that was really good, that was going well. And the dementia nurse was booked to visit the vulnerable person at home and complete a memory assessment. When we revisited in July, carer was in attendance. There was significant progress made in the home. Living room, kitchen, hallway and landing were all clear, and the dining room and upstairs area was being started on. The person had expressed that actually what she wishes to do more than anything is move to a bungalow. And that would support her with her decrease in mobility. So permission had been granted for carers to support with their shopping, bills and everything else, so that she would have access to the community now, be able to get out and about. And she would start to obviously request this support herself, which was the first time she'd done this, which was great. The vulnerable person and their housing provider and the carer, we did another joint visit in August, alarms tested and working, and now the upstairs of the home was being supported to be cleared. The old stair lift had been removed. This allowed much more access up and down the stairs, and the upstairs bathroom was then clear. Still reluctant on the bedrooms, but bearing in mind, remember these were the ones that were head height, so this was the worst hoarding in the 2 bedrooms. The lady was particularly distressed about these because she said the possessions belonged to relatives who used to live at the property with her, but they passed away some time ago. She understood she needed to clear these, but was really struggling with the difficulty in parting. Because she wanted to move to a bungalow, she knew she had to clear this because the housing will not allow the request to move unless obviously she'd done this. But carers was also supporting at the time with another garden clearance because that had got bad again. Due to the significant improvements, we no longer needed to keep visiting so regularly, so we changed our visiting to every 3 months just so that we could keep sort of up to date with what was going on with housing and the person. And partners, the carers, to continue their support with the clearance in the home and to help her access in the community, because that was improving her quality of life. Housing was continuing to monitor the living conditions and keep the memento going, support her application for moving once the home was clear. And social care were reviewing her care package to make sure that she had the right support in place. So what did we use? We used, it was really only sort of people power, mostly we couldn't really put a cost on this because we didn't use a lot. We didn't get frequent calls to the property, and we didn't really provide any equipment because the housing provider was there providing everything that the person needed. Barriers, we felt that this was a particularly successful hoarding case. We don't have many of these, which is why I wanted to share it with you, because I wanted it to be one of our successful hoarding cases. We felt that one of the only barriers really was the GP not being responsive to MDT invitations. It's so difficult, I know, knowing sort of how busy people are in a GP surgery. It is difficult to get out and to go and attend an MDT meeting or an ARM meeting. The social worker was chasing them though and getting updates, so that was, at least they were linked in. Before we go to what worked well, we'll again, come back into the room. So before we sort of go to tell you what I think worked well from our point of view, has anybody got any kind of observations that they think worked well in that, or what would have worked better? Or other agencies that are on the call that we could have involved potentially that we didn't involve, that we haven't even thought about? No hands? Okay, can't see any hands up, so we'll go back and have a little look at what we did do. So we felt that what worked well was the timely manner that all services got involved. We felt that we worked effectively together, that everybody in that partnership did really work to support the person, and they kept the person at the heart of what they were doing. We also thought that when the vulnerable person showed reluctance to engage in the beginning, that we use those familiar faces, which is really important. So take someone out on the visit that they have already got the rapport with, because that seemed to work really well with them, because they did find it difficult to build that rapport. As a result of everything, we felt that what worked really well is that that person is living in a much safer environment, and they're not far off being able to apply for more suitable accommodation because of all the work that's been done. We felt fire risks were massively reduced, and that was obviously our worry at the beginning. They had assistive technology to support with safe evacuation. They were accessing the community, which is a massive positive to our quality of life, and also our GP appointments, and now in receipt of the correct benefits, which is a massive plus as well. That we felt their wishes and feelings were always taken in consideration and respected, and that nothing was forced upon the person, and that had a positive impact on her willingness to engage, and her massively on the fact that she did clear the property. The care package is now increased, and just 2 bedrooms are left to clear before she can apply to move. So there's a real light at the end of the tunnel. What could have been done differently? We felt the GP lack of engagement was a concern due to the housing had massive concerns over the memory and poor physical health. Social worker was able to pass on these concerns, though, to ensure the GP we got the correct memory assessments were completed. So it didn't turn out in the end that it was a blocker, but it might have been made easier. So what changes came as a result? As we said, we've got a complex case officer permanently in post now. More and more hoarding cases are coming to light from referrals from partner agencies. So we felt we needed to do some work about on hoarding. As a county, we've launched the hoarding framework now. We've presented to countless partners on hoarding. We've done hoarding and self-neglect presentations. We've done hoarding framework and presentations about the framework. We have had a massive increase in referrals regarding hoarding cases from most of the complex and kind of really difficult ones to unpick. If they are difficult to unpick, we've now got better working arrangements in place with this hoarding framework of what partners need to be involved in hoarding cases and how we can improve someone's quality of life. And we've also managed to feedback to our crews as well, because we know that that helps. Crews will tell us more about safeguarding if we tell them what to tell us. So we've done even more training and how to refer into us. And as a result, we as a service have set up a safeguarding inbox. So people can, partners and internally, we can refer into that inbox, and several of us have that inbox as our priority. We know that effective partner working makes a massive difference to the occupier, and positive case studies need to be shared, because we never share these positive ones. We always share all our negative stuff, but we never think to share the learning on a positive one where it went well. We held a partnership event in September, late September, to talk about the hoarding framework and to see where we can take it from here. It's slow progress, but we're hoping to have a further meeting, because lots of partners suggested we should have some kind of hoarding group set up where we can take these cases and discuss them in the county. And we've also been contacted by Health to complete a presentation to GPs, which we actually did on Friday. So I'll come back to the room and stop sharing, and then we can all come back in. So basically on Friday we talked to GPs across the county. There was about 50 or 60 GPs in the room, and we delivered some stuff because they're doing more stuff about self-neglect and hoarding, so we delivered to them, which was a big plus side, because obviously that will help us in terms of referrals coming into us. But as I said before, the hoarding framework and the links to us are all up on the Safeguarding Adult website, so you can have a look at that. If you want us to come and deliver to you about the hoarding framework or hoarding and self-neglect in the fire service, what we can do to help, then obviously we're more than happy to do that. And if people are interested in joining some kind of hoarding group where we can come together maybe 3 or 4 times a year and discuss anything that's really blocking us as a county, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that came up in the partnership event we did was a big block is not having the mental health kind of assistance readily available. We have Mind, which are brilliant and run a group in Kettering, and we have Hoarding UK, which will support with telephone calls to hoarders in our county, but we don't have much else. So it's really difficult for partners to know where to go with kind of hoarding cases. So I think that would be a real plus side if we could get that sort of mental health support, would be really good. Thank you. Someone's just put in the chat, I think, that they think that would be hoarding group is a brilliant idea. So that's really great. I think if we can get something like that going, it would be a massive positive. This individual did have a record from West and inclusion officer of the adult social care team. Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that. That's very interesting. Oh, thank you, Sue. That's very handy to know that you've actually found it useful. So has anybody got any other questions? They don't have to be about those 2 case studies. Just before we finish, because we're just coming up to the end. Anybody got any questions about the work we do in the fire service or how we can help you? Or obviously anything else that you want to know about our home safety visits, or any other visits we can carry out. Any questions at all? Not about absolutely anything in the world, because I don't know about lots of things, but I do know anything to do with fire or hoarding or home safety. There's no questions coming up in the chat. I'll just check anybody's got their hands up. And no hands up, so I think we have no questions. If you do think of any, oh, hang on, Michelle, you've got your hand up?
Oh yeah, just quickly. So I agree with you, Tina, as a social services worker in the community hubs, we are getting more and more hoarding cases coming in. We are trying really hard to work with these people, but a lot of the times I think what we haven't sort of maybe said here is that we need a lot of mental health input. Sometimes I've got a case at the moment myself that there is just nothing I can really do at the time, because it's the hoarding is such an ingrained mental health issue. We are literally just popping to see this lady every week, trying to have some sort of rapport with her. There's no getting rid of anything at this point, and it could take a very, very, very long time. But yeah, I think bringing in mental health services would be really, really important, because until somebody looks at why and, you know, maybe their feelings around what's going on, it's very difficult for us to make any, or support them to make any changes at the moment. So I think, yeah, that's just another service that needs to be highlighted in a lot of these cases, really.
I think it's spot on, absolutely spot on, because we know that if we don't tackle the main issue or the what's going on, it won't help, because you can clear a property and it will be exactly the same, because you're not actually dealing with the root cause. And we're not, like you said, we're not professional in that mental health arena. We can't deal with that root cause. That needs to be slow, progressive work over a long period of time with somebody. If we truly want the best result, it has to be like that. And I know other services, fire service throughout the country, have, with their environmental protection and, you know, and other partners, they've built kind of a little bit of a hub where they've actually got specific hoarding mental health workers that will come in and work with people. And I think if they're going up at the rate they're going up, it's something that in the future we're going to have to try and look at maybe together, trying to get some funding for that kind of support. Because like you said, we can't, Mind are a charity, and you can't, in the best will in the world, they're absolutely amazing, but they can't deal with the cases we're getting coming in. And like I said, one visit a week, or, you know, somebody trying, you can't, it's not possible. It's not really fair to the person, because sometimes they don't even know, they can't get to the bottom of the problem, they don't know why they're doing it. And
No.
I think someone put in the chat actually, which was a cracking idea, about grief support and grief counselling. Some of the time they don't know it's that, but it actually is. It's from a bereavement, it's from grief, it's from something that's triggered in their background that's happened that they, you know, is making them keep those possessions. We know that empty nest syndrome, like you said, bereavement, that all adds to hoarding and why people might keep stuff. Sometimes that could be a trigger. It doesn't even have to have, when they can't really think back to when it started, because they don't make the connection it started with that event, because that event came quite a bit before and it was, you know, it was different. But it's really difficult because a lot of the time we do know that the environment they're living in isn't healthy. It's not healthy, it's not right, but we can't say to them, do you not see that hoarding human excrement or anything like that, or rubbish bags, is not healthy? Because they can't see beyond that, because it's not rubbish, it's a possession. So yeah, like I said, it's totally, it needs that mental health support. And I think Suzanne just put up that it is something that we lack. We lack kind of throughout the county, but something that I know we're all mentioning at every given opportunity we can, that, you know, in the county and through the Adult Safeguarding Board, that we can get some more help and support.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon, you've got your hand up.
Hi, yeah, sorry. I just wanted to sort of say, Tina, in respect to, did you say you were trying to set up a hoarding kind of like support group? Is that for professionals to use?
Yeah, that would be for us. So rather than it being for support for the actual people who are hoarding, because that needs to be the specialist mental health support, it would be for us. So it would be for partners to come together maybe up to 4 times a year, and discuss any cases that they're really struggling with themselves. I mean, obviously we try and get some kind of contact with each other in between. So if you thought, well, actually, I think, let me just pick up the phone to environmental health, they might be able to help with that because there was loads of vermin, or, you know, so we knew where to go with stuff. But also, if we were really struggling, is there, you know, way that we can come together and discuss cases in a more formal way, like we do, a bit like we do with all the kind of sharing we do with ARMS and MDTs. But if it's not meeting like the threshold because it's the only kind of thing around it is that the person needs mental health support, then there's a potential that it's going to fall through the gap of not sort of reaching any threshold. So could we come together as partners and just discuss that hoarding issue, and what we can do? Very often it will trigger something else anyway, because there's already so much else happening, like self-neglect. So it probably is just where there's a little bit of a gap, and it falls through that gap.
Yeah, 100%. I'd like to be a part of that. If you need help setting it up or anything. Obviously, we work with the Rough Sleeping team, and it's kind of like even some of our rough sleepers, the hoarding is still continuing when they haven't got accommodation. And then it's trying to get them rehoused while still trying to get support, which is a battle for them to even accept there's a hoarding issue. And that's so yeah.
We find that a lot, and even when they are like housed, because of the kind of street mentality that you keep everything because it could come in handy, we tend to find then that you do actually end up as hoarding when you then move into property, because you keep everything, don't you? So yeah, they can kind of transfer that behaviour as well.
Yeah, or they've lost accommodation because of the hoarding behaviour, and then it's trying to break that cycle so that we can get them into a new form of accommodation. But then there's the fact that they're so high that nobody will accept them, and that. So I'd like to be a part of that group. I don't know how you want to do it. If you want everybody to write their emails in, or
yeah, if people want to kind of, I mean, at the meeting we had, lots of partners did indicate they wanted to be involved. So what I'll do is anybody else that sort of says now they want to be involved, then yeah, put it in the chat, and then I'll pick those up. And we're hoping in the new year, maybe sort of February time, to kind of invite everybody to an initial meeting, just to kind of have a chat through how it could look and what we could do. Perfect. Thank you, Sharon. Okay. Any other hands up? Thanks, Sharon, for your email address. Right, there's no other hands up, so I just want to say a massive thank you. It's really great to kind of share our case studies with people because we kind of use them internally mostly. So it's really great to share them and to kind of get other people's opinions, because it's hard when you think you're doing the right job, but actually you don't know if you are doing everything you can. So thank you. So Chloe's just reminded me to let you all know. Let's just share this for you. That you have an evaluation form to complete. So if I just share that, there's the Adult Safeguarding Board email address and website, and then there is a link on the next one to the actual evaluation form. So there's a QR code there that you can just download. I think Chloe will also put it in the chat so that you can download that form and fill that in. And also to say that we have a Twitter address at Northants SAB. So please follow on Twitter the Safeguarding Adults Board and tweet about the sessions this week, because it's all really good publicity to get people going to drive them to the website so that we can share all the information and learning. And like we said, this will be available on the website as well, the recordings, if you've missed any. And Chloe's also asked me to remind you that you will only get a certificate if you fill in the evaluation form. So you have to fill in an evaluation form to get a certificate, folks. But thank you so much. It's been absolutely amazing, and it's great to chat to everyone. I'll hand you back to Chloe.
Oh, thanks, Tina. That was brilliant. I will stop the recording now.